Thank you so much, Doctor. It's so good to be with other family businesses, other small businesses. I don't know what it's like to be anything other than a small business owner. You bring your product to the packer, and I bring your product to the plate. So there's a connection there, I think. But more importantly, there's a connection because I'm transitioning out. I'm getting a little bit too old to carry the burden. And this is our story about how we went through this terrible change, this terrible crisis within our family organization, and how we emerged on the other side. I don't suggest it would work for you. I'm only conveying a message of how it worked for us. It all started in 2006. I have two brothers who are partners, the middle brother and the 11th oldest, the youngest brother. There are 11 of us in a 3-bedroom home. So there were 13 family members, 11 children. And my father was a World War II Army sergeant in combat. And then he became an electrical engineer. He worked for Zenith Radio, and he was in charge of quality assurance. And he ran our family like we were a squad, one of his squad members, or were part of his platoon. And like we were intimate devices, an electrical blueprint. And he beat me several times about the face with his hand because I didn't do what he told me to do. But more importantly, that my younger brothers and sisters didn't do what he wanted them to do. I could take the punishment for what I did wrong, but I didn't understand why am I being punished for the transgressions of my siblings. And he said, you're the oldest. You're responsible for them. Heck of a lesson for a 10-year-old boy to understand. But fast forward to 2006, we had moved from a 5,000 square foot building into a 25,000 square foot building. And my two brothers and I were arguing territorial rights. And I'm the alpha male, I'm the oldest, and I can't lose control. So we had vicious fights over the territorial rights. So I crept into my office one morning in January of 2006 and sat at my desk. And two employees approached my desk. One was a 24-year-old young man, who's my son Tim, and a 23-year-old young lady named Jamie. And they said this fateful word, the word that I dreaded at the age of 55. And that word was change. And when I looked at them, this is what I saw in their faces. The fear of change. And I asked them, change what? And they said, either you change or we're leaving. And let's hear it from them. This is from an investigation, a deep dive evidence-based research by Benedictine University, along with University of Michigan, about family-run businesses and small businesses that are based on values. So as we have a return on investment, this project is called the return on values. Let's hear it from Tim. Tim, my son, is the guy in the white shirt. We skipped the video. Here we go. And I sit right in the front of the building to greet people as they walk in the door in an open office. And two young people were standing there, a 24-year-old named Tim and a 23-year-old named Jamie. And I said, what can I do for you? And it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. And Jamie blurted out, if you don't change, we're leaving. And I said, change what? And she said, we don't like command and control.
We felt that the way he was doing things was great for him for the previous 35 years, but to keep things going, to keep us around, he needed a change.
Tim said, we want an employee-generated, employee-maintained culture. We want to define the way we work. We're tired of command and control. We're tired of your brothers yelling at us, you yelling at us, spending the first 20 or 30 minutes of every day figuring out and trying to understand what mood the owners were in.
We realized that our future and the company's future were in people like Tim and Jamie's hands.
So for me, the defining moment was very simple. I couldn't lose them, and I couldn't lose their approach to business.
One of our advisors, our consulting chef at the time, recommended that we read the book Good to Great. Once we read it, the whole leadership team read it, including Tim and Jamie, And I think that's what sparked the idea in them of getting our culture down on paper and up on the walls and following the culture on a daily basis.
So one day in March, we started the process of developing the culture. It was March of 2006. And on a whiteboard in our conference room, one representative from each team started listing what their team thought were core values, important core values.
It's built on trust and mutual respect. It's built also on the belief that people are able to chart their own course and self-direct themselves.
I think the most important part is getting the buy-in from every single staff and not excluding them when we were developing the culture, and just asking their opinion and saying, what do you think? And with that buy-in, then they can't say, you know what, I don't like this, because they were the ones that created it.
It took about 4 meetings for us to hammer out the details of all of those previously just mentioned things, plus to set your base camps. You set 1-year base camps, 3-year base camps, 5-year base camps.
We have a monthly Good to Great Council where we meet to discuss culture items, and it gives a platform for every person in this company to have their voice heard.
They broke down the departments, the silos, and got rid of the word department and got rid of the word manager and changed everything to teams.
One of the key things people want is lifelong learning. So we started Tasty Catering University.
We have an open door policy, and a lot of times people will say, hey, this is what I think, or this is my issue today.
Where have you ever heard of a catering company that sits in a boardroom and talks about emotional intelligence?
We've got a full succession plan in place. We know that if Tom, Larry, and I were all hit tomorrow by the proverbial bus, exactly what's going to happen with the company finances, with the company succession.
We revisited our base camps, our 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year base camps. And the council had not even been 5 years old at the time when we did this, and we had already accomplished everything that we had set out to do.
Shortly thereafter, I was at a business meeting and I was handed a bunch of cards by our marketing director, Aaron, my new business cards, and I handed it to a friend of mine. It was at an Inc. conference, and he remarked, that's an unusual title. And I said, what's wrong with Chief Executive Officer? What's different about that? He said, that's not what it says. And I looked at the card and it said Chief Culture Officer. But when I asked her why did she do that to me, she said, we all decided that if you make sure the culture is enforced, that we don't need a Chief Executive Officer. We don't need a president. How right was Aaron? Aaron was very right when she said that if I focused on the behaviors and the human beings in the company, and we clearly defined our culture, our behaviors, that we don't need a chief executive officer, we don't need a president. And we don't have a chief executive officer. For the state of Illinois, we have a president because I go to jail if we do something wrong. You have to define who the chief leader is. But Tim said something that was really important, and he had never said something like that clearly until this recording. He said what worked for him for 35 years wasn't going to work for us. And it reminded me of my father. My father firmly believed in Kurt Lewin's theory that leadership management should be based on authoritarian control. There might be some delegative in there. And then there was a switch to transformational, transactional, servant leadership. And what kind of leader really works for young people? What kind of leader do they respect? So I went on a quest to discover this because I'm the chief culture officer. All I'm responsible for is culture. Tim also said something that was critical, was that the people created the culture. My 2 brothers and I were allowed in the room while they did this, but we sat in the corner. In fact, they have a picture of it, the 3 Stooges, Moe, Curly, and Larry sitting there. And they said, you can be in the room. If you want to speak, raise your hand, but we may not call on you. Well, this was a complete revolt. It was a revolting development. But it worked. It worked to pinnacles that I didn't think we'd ever achieve. We found out that it was employee engagement that drives an organization's success. I thought it was profit. Profit drives everything. In fact, I had a VC in to visit with me on Friday that had taken over a company, and he said, I heard you know about culture and I need to talk to you about it, but I got to get profit under control first. I said, no, culture comes first, profit comes second. So culture is the #1 word that was researched online in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 2015, organizational culture. It's becoming a buzzword. It's become a buzzword. But culture is the ground basis for engagement. So as the employee engagement in an organization rises, ours went from below sub 50 up into the stratosphere. As that rose, so did our P&Ls. It was a lagging indicator. So employee engagement is the emotional commitment an employee has to its organization's values, vision, and mission, which results in higher discretionary effort, higher discretionary thoughts for the organization. Well, if you don't clearly define your values and clearly define your vision and mission, how can anybody become emotionally committed to that? Right? Doesn't make sense. For years, I thought, I know my values. You do what I tell you to do because I pay you. Didn't work. Had high turnover. I wrote that off as being in the hospitality industry. I opened my first business in 1971. I was 23 years old. And now I've started, I think, 33 businesses, bought 3, failed miserably, lost millions of dollars in 2 of them. And all the way through the early years until 2006, it was all mine. It was me, I was responsible for it. This transformation showed it was, when it's about us, it's better. So I learned what being a leader is about. But here's a Gallup poll that accents the factor of, this is from the book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. Evidence-based research shows that the average company in the United States is 33% engagement, 50% just show up and do the job, and 7% are pathological liars, psychopaths, sociopaths, and they want to see you fail. So they do everything in their power to make your organization fail. So a world-class company, the numbers change, 67%, 26 and 7. Now let's see if we're ready to gamble on an NFL game. Let's play over and under. Do you think Tasty Catering's employee engagement is over 75? Please raise your hand. Nobody does. A few do. Okay, those that raise your hand, be proud. Raise your hand again. Okay, is it over 80%? Maybe. How about 85? Raise your hand if you believe that's where it's at. Here it is. 94% last year. We reached a pinnacle of 98% 2 years ago, dropped down to 94% last year. But the key ingredient here, the key component, is that there are 0 disengaged, actively disengaged employees. Now, what does that mean to me as a business owner? Here's your ROI. That means Tasty Catering has 100 employees, 100 full-time employees. Mathematical calculation based on 98%, I didn't change it when I went to 94, is that if I was a world-class company, we would need 149 employees to match that performance. And if we were just an average company, 303 employees. Numbers matter. And our employees don't want any more employees because those that create the wealth share in the wealth. So they don't want any more. They want to assume more and more responsibility. Leadership. Found out that leadership had changed drastically. So as Chief Culture Officer, I've gone back to universities, I've gone back to studying, reading, researching. What kind of leadership traits have developed that I'm not aware of? Because my leadership formulation was at the age of 10 through the age of 20. 23 years old, I was in business for myself. Ethical behavior. What's ethical behavior? We define it. We use Immanuel Kant's 4 cohorts of ethics. Now follow along with this and see if we could work together. You have the right to be told the truth. Agree? You have the right to your privacy. Do you agree? Why doesn't our federal government believe in that? And they wonder why we question them. The third one is you have the right not to be injured, psychologically, emotionally, physically, or financially. And the fourth one is you have the right to an implied or explicit contract. These are natural laws. This was developed by Immanuel Kant back in 1860 in Germany, and today they can't prove it wrong. So that's what we adopted as ethical behavior. I believe in authentic leadership, which means I follow our core values, I follow our culture statement, which is the values, vision, and mission. Every day, 100% of the time, I'm awake, 24 hours a day. Leadership is a way of life, management's a job. So we teach in our company, we have TC University, I taught classes on Thursday and Friday about leadership to line-level employees about what leaders should be doing so they can hold their leaders accountable. The second one is positive psychological capital. We've all had problems in our businesses, right? The markets have shifted, problems have happened. The losers, the ones that aren't here, are the ones that give up the ghost screaming, I can't handle this anymore. So positive psychological capital is developed by Fred Luthans out of the University of Nebraska. It says, first is hope. It's hero, H-E-R-O. Hope, efficacy, the ability to set goals and achieve them. Psychological resiliency, the R. When you have a problem, can you overcome the problem? If you are, your success. And then optimism. You can teach that. We teach that to our employees. The next one is emotional intelligence. Understanding who you are, being mindful of who you are and the people around you. I was never emotionally concerned about the people that work for me. They were revenue generators. Pay them, do your job. Yeah, I cared about them. Yeah, you're nice people. But really, I didn't care about them. I cared about the fear because they didn't understand the fears I had and the problems I had. So really, should I care about their fears? Didn't make sense to me. The last one is focus on responsibility, not privileged. I thought it was a privilege to be an owner. But I found out it was a privilege that I wanted to share, the privilege of being the signee on a mortgage, a signee for payroll checks, a signee for lines of credit. And through this metamorphosis, through this change, I felt that if we could share that responsibility to our organization, that if I'm responsible for the people are going to be responsible for the organization. So I don't think it's a privilege anymore. I think it's a privilege to be responsible. But we don't have an org chart, we have a responsibility chart. And at the top of the responsibility chart is our culture statement. Then it's who's responsible for whom. So everybody knows there's a human being responsible for who they are and what they're doing. Culture. Culture cannot be replicated. Every family has a culture, every organization has a culture. Some are toxic, some are wonderful. We did a survey asking our employees to list the marketplace differentiator for Tasty Catering. What separates us? I expected to hear about our brisket. We have fabulous brisket. Champagne chicken. Some of our famous dishes. And I'm thinking, I can't wait to see these results. They said number one is our culture. This is line-level employees, middle-level leaders, senior leaders, everybody in the organization. Number one response by popularity was our culture, is our marketplace differentiator. Number two was our human capital, our people. Number three was our marketing. Number four was our product. They got it. They understood. We have a young lady who joined us 3 years ago who came from the University of Southern California, and she had majored in business and entrepreneurship, but she's from Chicago and wanted to get into hospitality. And she researched all the hospitality companies in Chicago, and she came to work for us. She asked for an internship. We didn't have a job, a full-time job. And I found out through our sales director that brought her on that she came to Tasty because she read about our culture. And she went online, and on our homepage on our website lists our 7 core values. And she said, it must be important to you, and I can live with all of those 7 core values. And then she looked at our staffing. We have pictures of all of our staff with about a 3 or 4 or 5 second clip about them saying hello, so they become personalized. And she said, I noticed how many people you have that have been on there over 10 or 15 years. We're a 26-year-old company, and we have people that have been with us 25 years, 23 years, 20 years. And she said, turnover in this industry is above 50%, and you're down at a lower number. I said, yeah, about 4% per annum. So it attracted her. And then one day, her best friend came to work for us, who had gone to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, a top senior chef, excellent education, but then she went to hospitality school to learn how to be an event planner because she didn't want to work in a kitchen. Those two are the best wedding planners that I've ever met. They plan weddings, they plan big events, and they're 30 years old, best friends since kindergarten. And the culture is what attracted them to come to work for us. It wasn't our pay, it wasn't anything else. The next one is the culture underpins competitive advantage and higher financial performance. We're successful in large part due to our culture. It engages employees and increases, again, that word discretionary effort. Here's our Tasty Catering's core values, as defined by our employees. It hung on the wall for a period of time. After 2 months of a honeymoon period, They're hanging on the wall, and we started to revert to old behaviors. And people are becoming into the company, and they're not even noticing the core values, and I noticed something was slipping. And I had to listen to Aaron's point that I'm responsible for this. The only job I really have in our organization, from the top command and control guy, the only thing that I'm focusing on are people and behaviors. So we put numbers in front because it's easier to confront somebody by calling out a number. And then I'm an alcoholic. And what helped get me sober is I repeated the 12 steps over and over and over until I realized I'm powerless over alcohol. I was convinced of it. So we started repeating our whole culture statement before every meeting of 5 people or more. Sometimes you repeat it 3 times a day, and what happens is it becomes an assumed behavior. It becomes the way you live. Now, if you have a family business like we did, filled with nieces and nephews and brothers, we know what our behavior is, but does an outsider? How long does it take before they're fully engaged? So by repeating this consistently, it just becomes the expected behavior. And then it's me doing this, then it's senior leaders, then it's pretty soon everybody in the company. So new people, within 2-3 days, are behaving exactly the way the culture dictates. In fact, we have some guys that said to me one time, those 7 core values, that's the rules. I've worked at places that have more rules than that. I said, that's it. Here's a funny story about how this works. So I get the after-action reports late at night from events. Last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm drinking a bottle of water, reading about weddings that happened, what was good, what was bad, what issues that they had. And we do the Big Ten. So all Big Ten's headquarters in Rosemont. And on Saturdays, football Saturdays, we're there from 6 in the morning till late at night. So I'm reading all these pros and cons. Shift back about 8 years. I'm reading these pros and cons, and I realized one of our salespeople had not clicked on the charge for a upper level liquor bar. $4,000 she screwed up on. So I couldn't go back to sleep. I went into work and amped myself up with coffee, waiting for Sherry to walk in the door. Because she made me mad. That's our money, and I'm responsible for protecting our money. So when Sherry came up, I went to her desk, and I lit into her. And I said, Sherry, how come you didn't charge for that bar? And she turned around and said to me, is this number 2? Treat all with respect. And I said, no, I apologize. But is what you did number 3, 5, and 7? Can we have those up again, please? 3, 5, and 7. Quality in what you do. High service or strong determination to be the best, and responsibility of the organization. She said, no, I'm sorry. And she laughed, and that was the end of it. That day at lunch, we eat as a family at 12:30. She stood up and said, I made a mistake last night, cost us $4,000. I'm sorry. I'll try to make sure it never happens again. That's how the culture works in our organization. And of course, I was the first one called out on that. And as soon as I started my harangue at Sherry, I noticed that the room got quiet. There's about 12 salespeople in her area, and everybody stopped talking to listen to the big idiot confronting Sherry. A couple of months later, it was the summertime, and this had become popular, calling people out for behaviors. Is this number 2? Is this number 5? Is this number 4? Is this the best you can do? We had a young lady who had known since, well, actually, she was in her mother's arms at church. I always wanted to sit behind this lady because her daughter was gorgeous, little blonde ringlets and cheery little girl. And I would distract her mother during church by waving at her and smiling with her. Well, she came to work for me, for us, and she's out at an event, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. Her cold beer, instead of taking the cold beer out of the cooler, she took already tapped beer that was flat. She took red wine instead of white wine to an outdoor event. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And because her team had read the culture statement before they started the event, this was fresh on Julie's mind. Julie went up to the business owner and said, we're not charging you for this event. This event was $5,000. She said, it violates our culture. It violates our core values, and I can't charge you for that. It's unethical. And the guy said, little girl, put your boss on the phone. I want to talk to him. And my brother answered it knowing it was Julie's phone. He could see which phone it was. And he said, if Julie said it's no charge, it is no charge. First time we ever did that. First time any employee has given away our money. Julie did that, and it became a standard for our business. And here's Julie now. Julie is now a principal at a school in the Chicagoland area. Phenomenal leader, phenomenal young lady, and she still comes back to help us when we really get buried on events. Julie Goosetree lives forever. Sherry Brown, Julie Goosetree live forever in the legacy statements of our culture, our tribal statements. Increased discretionary thoughts. How many thoughts do you think you have every single day? And I didn't know this until I did some research with the Institute of Mental Health and Wellness. Mental health and wellness. How many thoughts? As you ponder that, the answer is 60,000. 60,000 thoughts you have every single day. Young people, 20% of their thoughts are about lust. Maybe it's just not confined to young people. 20% of people my age, it's about mortality. In fact, my wife wants to know before the end of this year, do I want to be buried or burnt? I'd rather think about lust than think about being burnt. How many thoughts does the average employee give an organization? 6 to 8%. Now, how do we increase those? We have strong culture statements that dictate behavior. We remove the disruptors. One of the biggest disruptors, to incentivize people with money is a waste of time, your time and their time. Find the right people and remove the disruptors from their life, and they produce better, phenomenally better. One of the biggest disruptors in our company was succession plan, because it's always been about Tom and his 2 little brothers. We, as Kevin mentioned in that film, we not only have a succession plan, but we have every employee has a succession plan. Who's going to replace you 2 people down? So if somebody gets hurt, one of our senior leaders gets hurt, we already know who's going to step into that place seamlessly. What did that mean to our employees? They know when I'm leaving. In fact, Tim's in charge of all of our companies. We have 7 operating companies and a bunch of investments. Tim in 2013 was elected by our senior leadership team to replace me. Tim, as part of our corporate resolution, Tim has the right to tell me when it's time to leave. And there's a great book by Bo Burlingham called Finish Big, just came out about a year ago. And it's about people that are exiting their businesses, because we all exit. We either walk out or we go out feet first, but we exit. And the biggest problem that I face is, how do I become relevant afterwards? Where's my relevance? Because all I've been is a business owner for 46 years. So the succession plan helps the employees realize that there's life after Tom. They'd probably be very happy about that. That's why I'm on the road speaking. This is the source of organizational behavior, according to scientists. Antecedents lead to behaviors, lead to consequences. My job is not chief executive officer, it's chief culture officer responsible for the behaviors, the B. Because Peter Drucker said, if you focus on the behaviors of an organization, the outcome will be wonderful. And the outcome of any organization that's toxic and bad is due to its behaviors being toxic and bad. Here are some of the consequences, the ABC, the consequence, the outcome. We did 94% employee engagement last year, 10,000 events down from 11,000 because we're selling smarter, not taking unprofitable jobs on. 104 errors realized. There's probably about 2,000 or 3,000 errors we made, but our employees are so engaged, they fixed the problems before the people knew what was happening. At any wedding, you could have probably 40 errors before the bride tastes the first bite of her entree. Our sales were up 10%, but our profit was up 57%. This is the 4th year in a row with those kind of numbers. I'm wondering, when is this profit increase going to stop? But instead of having one person focused on profitability, we have 100 full-time employees and 130 part-time employees focused on how do we make this organization stronger. Here's some unintended consequences. John Sitka, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, John. John is with the Angus, help me with this, Angus beef, certified Angus beef. Thank you, Larry. If I don't memorize it, I get lost. And we were talking about this last night. 2 years ago, this month, John and I won awards for our organization from the American Psychological Association for having the psychologically healthiest workplaces in America in our segments. That means our people come to work happy and they go home happy. We won 52 awards for being the best place to work. Here are the employees that work for us that started their own business. The one on the upper left is my daughter Erin. She's got her hair in a French braid. I always tell her that picture makes you look like a cute little boy. There's Jamie, who told me to change or else, and there's Tim, the Rios family, and Paul Suggs, the businesses that they started, and each one of those businesses provides a revenue stream to me. It's my 401k. So by relinquishing control over to the employees, they took care of me for the rest of my life. And the problem that we have is that I didn't trust a 24-year-old young man to run our organization, and yet I started a business at 23 years old. I couldn't understand why I didn't see through that earlier. So my recommendation, my point, my belief, and the reason why I'm here is I just wanted to share my story that there's a better way to do business in a family organization. There's a better way to engage family members. God bless you all. Thank you.